We use that experts term around here loosely. You guys deserve it, though. Chase picked 12 of 14 winners correctly last week. Brad got 11, and I finished with 10. Last place. I have some catching up to do. He's Brad Anderson. This is Chase Miller, both from 740 The Fan. Guys, let's get right to it. What was your biggest surprise from last week? Doesn't matter the class. Brad, we'll start with you.
I think the biggest surprise probably was Century getting pushed to the gun, basically, by Davies. Davies came out with a great game plan, a lot of big plays, and to Century's credit, Jacob Olsen kind of took things into his own hands offensively, made some big plays at the end. Defensively, it's a lot of three and outs late in the game on Davies. The defense tightened up, and Century found a way to win. So that was probably the biggest surprise that Century got pushed the way they did.
I would have to agree with Brad, but if I go to a different class, I'll go 1A, and just the fact that Velva shut out Beulah, and Beulah's been a team that's been scoring points, been rushing the football against everybody, and all of a sudden those little gimmick plays, or you're coming up as a bobsled, so to speak, where there's 11 guys before they break and go to a formation for Beulah. Velva had no problem with it. They were easy, and they just kind of did one thing after another. Beulah lost their center midway through that game, which didn't help the process, but I think Velva was shutting out the Miners was a big upset for me.
I think Cavalier beating Napoleon the way that it had to come back from behind, that was pretty impressive what the Tornadoes were able to do rallying from behind. Of course, the big injury for Napoleon was Jameson Fettig getting hurt in that one. Let's chat 3A semifinals. Minot pulled the upset over Cheyenne last week, scored 66 points. Century needed that last-second field goal like we just talked about to beat Davies. Are we in for a close one here, Brad?
I think it's going to be closer. I mean, I know Century really manhandled them the first time they played, but I think it's going to be a lot closer. I think Minot comes in with a lot of confidence. You're hanging 66 on anybody this time of year. That's a big thing, and they came up with some big plays on defense. They got that pick six that went for a score as well. And Century, to their credit, I mean, they're very disciplined, and they've been in this situation. They say they're kind of the hunted now, where they were the they were the team trying to chase Bismarck and even chase Minot for a time. But I think they come in disciplined. But Minot's, I think, coming in with a lot more confidence than they did the first time around.
Speaking of a team that's hunted, Chase, any chance Bismarck can stun West Fargo? The Packers really handled them in the regular season, 41-0.
If you take a look at the first game, you would say 41-0, right?
Yeah.
So the box score speaks for itself. But if you talk with both coaches, it's, well, there's a couple of turnovers. Maybe West Fargo had better field position to take advantage. Andy Gravdahl right now is throwing 64% for completion percentage, almost 2,000 passing yards on the season. Andy Gravdahl's been a load, but it's the Masambucos, the Franics, the Luke Lennons that have over 40-plus tackles for the Packers defense. If you're Bismarck, you have to get West Fargo on their heels early because they came out 14-0 just like that on Bismarck Legacy in the first 2 minutes of the game.
Absolutely dominant. They have been all year. In 2A Shanley, they're well rested. The Deacons beat Watford City 25-0 in the regular season, but the Wolves have won 7 in a row. Can they keep pace with the Deacons?
I think they can. It's 6-3, against Jamestown. And Watford City, they only give up 16 points per game. So defensively, it's where they're going to hang their hat on. They got a guy by the name of Hogue who has 88.5 tackles on the season. Their linebacker, Ewing, has 50 tackles on the season. They're going to try to create as many turnovers as possible. And the first time they played Shanley, it was a close ball game, 25-0 up in Watford City. The Deacons lost their starting quarterback, and all of a sudden runs in Cade Busick, who has done nothing but wonders for that Deacons offense. 12 passing touchdowns, 1,000 yards through the air, 0 interceptions. I think this one could be similar to the Jamestown game, where first one to double figures might be the one that comes out with the win.
Brad, how about the St. Mary's Devils Lake matchup? What do you see happening there?
Devils Lake, I know the first time around, St. Mary's really handled them pretty well. Devils Lake played really well with Hornstein, the running back, had a really big game against Wahpeton. They took advantage. Wahpeton was really beat up in that game, and Dikey got hurt, which certainly was a factor. But I think they've got to control things early on. I think they've got to establish things with that ground game with Hornstein right away to have a chance against St. Mary's.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I don't know. I think St. Mary's Shanley, I think it's almost easy to get those two in the state championship. I think it will be. Watford City, I watched them last week. They are a very good defense, but this Shanley offense is something else, and Shanley doesn't need to run the ball and establish that as much as other teams do. They can sling it right now with Cade Busick.
No doubt about it. I mean, Cava's health is going to be a question, but they've got Buckholtz and they've got some other guys on the outside. They can beat you up over the top just as easily as they can run on the football. They've got probably the best balance, I think, maybe even 2A or 3A offensively, the way they can mix it up a little bit.
Well, I really like the matchups in Class A, so let's talk about those. Trinity's defense has been lights out. They just destroyed DeLax Burlington, 40-0 in the quarters. Now the Titans get to try to defend. Grant Skager in the Hillsborough Central Valley offense. What's your key in this one, Chase?
I think it's Skager left, Skager right, and Skager up the middle. 38 rushes for 244 yards and 4 touchdowns in their quarterfinal round win against Carrington. My thing is Dickinson Trinity. They led 26-0 at the half against Lax Burlington. They've had 6 shutouts so far this season. They don't give up a lot of points. And we mentioned it earlier, first one at double figures with Shanley and Watford City. This could be the same thing. And for Dickinson Trinity, kind of like Watford City, they got to go all the way across the state. How does that impact them in a game like this? But I like how we got all the seeds still left in Class A. I think Dickinson Trinity's defense, it's going to have to start there, 110%. And then the question is, can you make Troftgruben? He does have a really good arm, but can you make Troftgruben beat you through the air if you're Dickinson Trinity?
We'll see, Brad, that Velva versus Langdon Edmore Munich game, battle of unbeatens. Who's going to get that first loss?
I'm sticking with Langdon. I've kind of rode that horse a long time. So I was watching the highlights of the. We talked about Delvo and economy, but Tetro, the fullback, man, he's a load, and I think that could be, depending on the weather, and I think that that's another factor as well. We kind of talked about the balance, of Shanley's offense. It's the same way as well. If the passing game doesn't work with Delvo, and he can move with his legs and he can create plays if he needs to, but if you need to go to that ground game, that's a nice option to have, and they were able to match EEK very well with that last week.
I remember Tetro physically last year running over a couple of guys from Northern Cass, and to see him kind of emerge this last week like he did, boy, that could be a nightmare for a lot of teams. No one has that match for that physicality. I think it's like, 5'10", 220, 230 that he is, so he's a scary guy. Finally tonight, man, I think we've all been looking forward to the potential of this matchup. Finally, we get to see a Cavalier against Wyndmere-Lidgerwood. The top-ranked Tornadoes had to rally from behind to beat Napoleon. Who do you give the edge to in this matchup, Brad?
Man, I probably go Cavalier, maybe just the home field advantage. You always say it's maybe worth, maybe 3 points, maybe a touchdown, that type of thing. But the thing with Wyndmere-Lidgerwood is we'll see is Wyatt Harless can make plays if he has to, but he hasn't had to be. He's been able to distribute things well to guys like Churchill, to the Vasquez brothers on the outside. And they have so many weapons that can beat you. Furch is another guy but if he needs to make a play, will he have to make a play? And can he make a play? I think he can. Where Cavalier, everything's kind of predicated around Erlob and their tailback as well.
Well, they were able to get the job done last week. The Shiloh-New Salem-Glen Ullin game is a rematch from the final week of the regular season. We talked about this one last week. The Holsteins won at Miller Field, 36-34 in a thriller. Will they punch their ticket back to the Dakota Bowl this year?
You take a look at the Shiloh Christian, Jaden Mitzel is going to have to be the playmaker for them. They got some other guys, but he's going to be the one to have to distribute, very similar to Hankey, for New Salem Glen Ullin. I think it's going to be a carbon copy of the regular season. It might be who has the football last, and we'll see how many points they can possibly put up on these two teams. We said it going into it, this would be a fun semifinal rematch to have between these two teams, and both teams have been to the Dakota Bowl recently. They understand what it takes to win a semifinal game and get there. The Holsteins, can they get a little bit of revenge in terms of trying to get back to the Dakota Bowl and coming out as the champions, not runners-up? So I think this is going to be a fun matchup. If you went to the game in the regular season, it's going to be the exact same type of game, I think, here in the semifinals.
Going to be a lot of fun. This Friday and Saturday, it is semifinal week. We have the Dakota Bowl next week. Guys, thanks for doing this again. Next week, we get to break down the championships.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Jody.